This video might get very boring very fast, so if you want to exit out of this, I wouldn't blame you. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Karen, and as a Canadian reader, I feel like I am obligated to talk about this today. I had originally wanted to make this days earlier, but because my schedule has been so hectic lately, I didn't get the chance to get caught up and finally sit down and film this. But today I am going to be reacting to my first time ever watching Canada Reads and reflecting on what I saw for this year's competition. So if you're not from Canada, you're probably watching this right now thinking, what is that? And if you are from Canada, you're probably sitting there and thinking, what is that? So every year since I think it was 2002, CBC has been hosting this competition called Canada Reads, where they pick 5 Canadian celebrities to represent 5 Canadian books that have previously been released, and they basically sit down and have a 4-day debate to determine which book Canada needs to read now. So I have been aware that this show existed for the past few years, but I never actually got to watch it. But then once I took my publishing program last summer, I realized kind of how important it is for the Canadian publishing industry, and since that is the industry I'm hoping to work in one day, I figured, you know what, I might as well sit down and watch it this year. So before I get into talking about how I felt my first time watching it and what I felt about this year's debate, I'm just going to let you guys know what the 5 books were this year and who was representing each. So they had The Break, which is by Katarina Vermette. I really hope I'm saying her last name right, and I'm probably going to pronounce a few other last names wrong, so just be aware. And it is a book written from the viewpoints of multiple Métis women, just discussing what their lives are like leading up until a tragedy hits their community. And that book was being represented by Candy Palmater, who, again, I might have said her last name wrong. Then there was also The Right to Be Cold by Sheila Watt-cloutier, which was the only nonfiction book in the competition this year. And it's basically a memoir about Sheila's experience growing up north and how global warming has affected her homeland. And there's also lots of facts in it about how global warming is affecting the earth. And that book was represented by Chantal Kraviazik. Then there was also Company Town by Madeline Ashby. It's about a female security guard who works on this oil rig that has been turned into kind of a city, and it's ruled by this very rich and powerful family, and she is hired to protect the son from death threats. And that book is being defended by Misha Brugger-Gossman, who I'm also hoping I did not pronounce her name wrong. Then the last 2 I was super excited to see in this competition this year. The one I've actually finished reading and the other I am currently reading. So the one I actually finished reading was 15 Dogs by Andre Alexis. So this book is about 15 dogs in a kennel who were given the ability to think like humans after Hermes and Apollo, the Greek gods, made a bet as to whether or not they would die happy if they were given that human intelligence. It is also the winner of the Scotiabank Giller Prize, which is Canada's highest literary award, so all eyes were on this book in the competition. And it was defended by Humble the Poet. And the final book that was in the competition this year was Nostalgia by M.G. Visanji, which some of you, if you've been watching my channel and have seen my first haul video recently, you'll recognize this book from that video. And it takes place in a futuristic Toronto, where there is a memory doctor by the name of Frank, who ends up meeting this patient named Preston, who suddenly makes him rethink everything about the society that he lives in. And it was being defended by Jody Middick. So the way the competition worked is that for each of the 4 days, they all took turns answering questions and kind of debating with each other about how basically Canadians could see themselves in this book and like what kind of message was in the book that would make them need to read it now. And at the end of the debate of each episode, all of the panelists would have to mark down on a ballot which book they believe should not get to continue on. And I have to say, as a first-time watcher of Canada Reads, I was really shocked about how intense some of the debates got, especially on day 1. I think day 1 was the most controversial episode and actually made it into the news, which I'm about to explain why. So as I said, Candy Pomander was defending the break, and she was making many great arguments about why it was such an important book to read at that moment, especially with all the Indigenous women who have gone missing. But one of the questions that kept coming up, not just on day one, but other days as well, was do all Canadians see themselves in this book? And one of the things that was brought up was that, well, there's no positive men in this book. So of course that started a huge feminist debate. At the very end of the episode, it was actually the break and Candy who got eliminated. So once that happened, there was a huge feminist debate on Twitter. The break and Candy Pomander actually were trending, which to get a Canadian book trending at all is crazy insane. At the end of the day, you have to remember that this is a competition, so people are going to say things to try and convince all the other panelists that they're debating with to try and get one book moved off the table. But it was kind of a poor suggestion to make that there should be positive male figures in this book. But this book, before Canada Reads even happened last week, had incredible sales, and sales are only continuing to go up because of this. So that was actually a pretty interesting thing to see happen. I do think that Candy did seem like a little bit of a sore loser once she was voted out, because although I do think The Break is a really important book, I definitely think after that all of the other books had a lot stronger cases. But she ended up making a comment, oh, of course the first book on is the one with Métis women or something like that, and my jaw actually dropped when she said that. I don't know if it was exactly fair to suggest that her fellow panelists were kind of being racist. I definitely do think that The Break is a very important book to read, and I'm so glad that everything that happened on that first day gave The Break the recognition it deserved, but that doesn't necessarily mean as a whole it was the best book in comparison to the others. The one thing I really like about Canada Reads is that even after a celebrity has been voted off, they actually get to stay on and help make cases for and against the other books. So Candy was there for all of the rest of the show, and so was everybody else as they were eliminated as well. And day 2, the arguments were even more intense than I think on day 1. I should mention too that Chantal Kraviazek was actually participating from Los Angeles because her son was actually put into the hospital recently because of an acute asthma attack he had as a result of global warming. So she had not only the passion to see that The Right to Be Cold won, but she also was so emotionally attached to the book. So day 1, she kind of got really defensive, especially against Jodi Middick. There was some comments back and forth. But for the whole rest of the competition, you can see that she always seemed to be kind of in another place, and like she got very hard to watch after a while, because while everybody has sympathy for everything that's going on, it's supposed to be a fun competition, so that kind of took away from it, I thought. But on day 2, a lot of the tables actually seemed to turn on 15 Dogs. Because again, they went back to the, can Canadians see themselves in this book? Does it speak to Canadians? And Candy actually brought up again, well, there's no positive female characters in this story. And then actually there was accusations from both her and I think Chantal that the book was very male-centric. And Humble the Poet gave the absolute best response. And I wish I wrote it down because it was so good. But my own opinion that formed based on what he argued and just all the things people tried to say to bring it down was that with a book like 15 Dogs, sometimes there is a lot of crappy characters and sometimes it's very male dominant, but the whole point of the book, the whole message of the book is behind that. Like, I don't think all books should have like these perfect, powerful characters and then like we be inspired by how great they are. Like, sometimes you have to write about poor people and poor characters and just people that suck in order to really absorb the message that the author is trying to send. So anytime people say things like, oh, well, there should be more positive men in The Break, there should be more positive females in 15 Dogs, there should be more positive females in nostalgia, I think that was another one that got brought up. It's not really fair because, I mean, look at books like A Clockwork Orange. Like, the whole message that Anthony Burgess was trying to send was behind how terrible Alex was, right? But Humble made a very good argument about how 15 Dogs demonstrates the drive for dominance and love and all sorts of other themes. Like, basically everything about the human condition can be found in that book. So it looked really bad for a while for him, but he totally nailed his case and kept 15 Dogs safe for another day. The part that got me really disappointed was on day 2, Nostalgia was eliminated. And I haven't finished reading this yet, but I have been enjoying it and the messages behind it so much so far. And basically the reason why they all voted to let it go was because some of the arguments were that this book is so focused on the one character that it's hard to apply some of the themes to other people. Even though I don't really think that's true, I kind of see where they were going with that, and I understand why it got eliminated that day. But it was very sad too, because this was a book that really spoke to Jody Middick, and I know he had good intentions with defending this book, even though a lot of people couldn't get past the centered on a white male part of this book. My personal opinion was the messages about diversity and everything were in there, you just had to really look for them. Day 3 was basically a no-brainer that The Right to Be Cold was next to be eliminated simply because it was the last nonfiction book. But the main argument made against that day was that it contained so much science that sometimes it was hard to absorb and really understand, and that just having it be Sheila's memoir would have been strong enough to really spread the message about global warming. But the argument for Canada Reads is, what book do all Canadians need to read now? And if not everybody can understand it, then it needs to go. Which I kind of agree with that, actually. Although I do think it is really important that we get more stories about global warming out there, I do kind of agree that definitely shouldn't have been the book to win, but it is very unfortunate because it was the only nonfiction book in the competition, so it really had that disadvantage going in. But one of the big things that kind of got on my nerves this episode was Candy, and I really wanted to like Candy because she seems so cool, but at one point, Misha Bruegger-Gossman was talking about Company Town, and I believe she was making a comparison to The Break, even though The Break has been out for 3 days at this point. And Candy, I kind of got lost in what was going on, but Candy asked her if she believed in reverse racism, and I'm not sure where that came from, but at that point it was kind of occurring to me that Candy seemed a little bit like somebody that likes to pick fights out of places that they don't really need to be. Like, she looks to start them when they don't need to be started. And just the look on Misha's face, she was like, are you serious? She seems really cool, and I support her beliefs and everything, but my conclusion at the end of day 3 was that I really hope they never bring her back as a panelist because she likes to start drama. And of course the final 2 were Company Town and 15 Dogs, and so it was a great back and forth debate between those 2 books, and all the panelists were weighing in on relatability and the human condition and the importance of everything that was being talked about. And what I think it initially came down to was that 15 Dogs, even though, you know, it's about dogs being given human intelligence, it is a lot easier to see yourself in, given like all the situations that the dogs find themselves in, than Company Town, because Company Town is definitely more dystopian, and while it is founded on ideas that exist in our time now, that's kind of the direction we're heading into, it's not necessarily real. So based on the fact that it was perhaps the most relatable and spoke the strongest to the human condition, 15 Dogs by Andrea Alexis was the winner of Canada Reads 2017. And I am so happy that a book that I actually read was the one that won. Humble the Poet did an absolutely amazing job. He was my absolute favorite part of Canada Reads 2017. Just his arguments were absolutely flawless. And I think after Jody Minnick was eliminated on day 2, he even said that like he only ever voted for 15 dogs that day to be eliminated because he knew that was his strongest competition. And as someone who has read this book, I can honestly agree with everybody that yes, this book is actually so good and it does really speak to the human condition. You learn so much about what it means to be a person from what happens with these dogs, and it is very sad. It's not like the happy ones like Marley and Me and A Dog's Life, or I don't even know if that was a book, but it's very real. And I think you'll find parts that either relate to you or really speak to you and your beliefs as a person. And I agree that this is the book that everybody in Canada and anybody international needs to read. So I am definitely going to be watching Canada Reads again next year and for years to come. I actually really enjoyed it and found their debates to be so interesting. I was really shocked at a lot of the drama that occurred because I always just thought it would be a fun competition, but it does really make you think a lot in terms of what is important in a book and what is important in terms of messages that we need to be sending to Canadians and, you know, our fellow readers. Hopefully next year I'll actually have time to read all of the books before it starts. It was actually really great to watch, and I'm glad that I actually was able to sit down and take it all in this year. It actually was a pretty exciting thing to sit down and watch, and I'm really looking forward to it next year, and I'm curious to see who's gonna walk away the winner and who they're going to bring in to defend books in the future. I definitely don't think I got to say everything I wanted to say, but it's been a few days and I tried to take notes, but I can't write down everything. But it was pretty controversial at times, and it was pretty fun, and it's definitely interesting, and if there's any clips out there, I recommend trying to find them and seeing how it all went down for yourselves. And I'd love to hear everybody else's opinion too, so feel free to comment that if one of the other books spoke more strongly to you, or if maybe you really agreed or you really disagreed with anything any of the panelists said. Alright guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment, as I said. I apologize that this video was a little bit more boring than what I normally do, but if you happen to enjoy it and would like to see more, make sure you are subscribed to my channel. Again, thank you for watching. As always, spread love and don't be a troll. Bye!